important. Oh, this meeting is being recorded. Welcome and thank you for coming to this important conversation on violence against women and girls. The objective of these conversation circles is to identify key action items and inspire commitments in a safe and an informal environment. So we hope this is a really meaningful opportunity for each of you to share your experiences and wisdom gained from your advocacy, to strategize together, make commitments, and also a meaningful opportunity for you to network and to form connections so that you leave this conversation feeling greater support and solidarity as you move forward in your respective work. I'm going to just briefly introduce the topic of violence against women and girls, and then also briefly introduce myself and allow my co-facilitators to introduce themselves. We'll review the safety guidelines for these conversation circles, and then we'll jump right into this important conversation. So, as you know, the specific conversation will focus on ending violence against women and girls, including in the context of climate change, in alignment with the theme for this year's 66th session of the Commission of the Status of Women, which is achieving gender equality and the empowerment of women and girls in the context of climate change, environmental and disaster risk reduction policies and programs. So, as you know, violence against women is widespread and a devastating human rights violation affecting every society across the globe. We learned from the most recent WHO report on violence against women prevalence estimates published in 2021 that nearly 1 in 3 women report experiencing some form of physical or sexual violence at least once in their life. And as we know, violence against women and girls is much broader than only physical and sexual violence. It also includes emotional, psychological, economic, and financial abuse, including domestic and family violence and discrimination. So hopefully you'll see acknowledged in our breakout groups how broadly violence against women and girls is perpetrated. So with that, my name is Sage Williams. I am a sexual assault nurse examiner by training, and I'm currently a member of the Global Network of Religions for Children, which is an interfaith network established in 56 countries, working to unite faith leaders together to act on common issues impacting children, including ending violence against children. So my current advocacy is advising and educating faith communities in both preventing child sexual abuse and training faith leaders to better support both adult and child survivors of sexual violence in their healing journey. This includes education, addressing harmful social norms and beliefs, and importantly, elevating survivor voices. I work daily with survivors of sexual violence. With that, it's my pleasure to turn the microphone over to my co-facilitator, Laura Hassan, for her to introduce herself.
Hi, everyone. My name is Laura Hassan. I'm based in Washington, D.C., where I am the executive director of Philomena Project. Our work is to address to engage global child protection advocates on Catholic Church Canon Law 1083 child marriage reform, and also to work at the intersection of other child protection issues that occur in the context of child enforced marriage, including sex and labor trafficking, online sexual exploitation of children, and other violations. So it's really a pleasure to be with you all here. Really energized by the wide range of experts and advocates that we have joining us from all around the globe. And we're really pleased that you're here. The main focus of our time today is going to be the breakout rooms, where everyone is going to be able to share their expertise, introduce themselves to one another, and hopefully get some good ideas generated and some momentum working around some pivotal issues inside the violent world. And before we begin, I just want to remind you of the virtual safety guidelines and principles that are vital to this virtual forum. So they're available on the website. They're also here on your screen. I'll drop a PDF in the chat in just a moment. But we're certain that all of you, as advocates who are committed to human flourishing, will certainly join us in using welcoming language, being committed to open dialogue and transparency, being driven by our collective mission of advancing gender equality, and aim toward having conversations of excellence, compassion, respect, positivity, and unity. And thank you in advance for making sure that everyone in your breakout group has a very positive experience and is able to contribute and use their voice. So
great. And our other co-facilitator also just arrived. Gloria, would you like to briefly introduce yourself as well?
Yeah, good morning, good afternoon, good evening, everyone, and welcome on board. This is our conversation on violence against women as part of CSW66. My name is Gloria Kankam from Ghana, and I work with women in law and development in Africa. I describe myself as a social justice activist and a Pan-African feminist. So welcome on board, everyone. Thank you.
Great. Well, as we get ready for our breakout sessions, we know that many of you come, we know that all of you come from a wide range of backgrounds with different activism platforms, different areas of expertise. And as we prepare to gather in some in groups that will bring together people from all over the world, we wanted to suggest for your reference some great the pillars from the Power to Girls campaign. This is a campaign that's currently mounted by Girls Not Brides, which I'm sure you guys are familiar with them. They're the leading child marriage advocacy group globally, and we think that their approach to advocacy is flexible and relevant and could be applied to many different realms. And so we hope that when you're in your groups, you might be able to tailor your action items around one of these 4 pillars as it pertains to your specific area of discussion. So the first pillar of the Power to Girls campaign, and you'll see it there on the screen, is supporting girls' rights. So certainly in each of your realms, I'm sure that all of you are working with girls of many ages, many backgrounds. And so this pillar is a commitment to build girls' life skills and confidence, to integrate girls into the program design, and to profile and create positive role models. The second pillar is a focus on scale. And so as many of you, I'm sure, have experienced that when you have a scalable project, you're able to impact more broadly and more deeply in the community. So this pillar, for instance, could include funding long-term social norms programs of 4 years or more, investing in diverse social norm stakeholders, and ensuring that community mobilization is led by frontline workers who are really who really have the frontline expertise. The third pillar is about transforming social norms, and it uses the same ideas as the focus on scale pillar, about the long-term funding, investing in diverse social norm stakeholders, and prioritizing and making sure there's great support for the frontline workers. And finally, the fourth pillar is supporting civil society movements to drive change. And some of the components that are included in this pillar are ensuring multi-year flexible community level funding, diversifying the stakeholder base, and investing in learning and evidence to identify key interventions and to scope new risks. So please keep these in mind as some unifying principles that you all might be able to use to bring your diverse groups together into some coherent next action steps as you develop and close up your discussions.
Okay, so what we're going to transition into next is the opportunity to break out into smaller groups to really start these discussions. And the breakout group will be 35 minutes in duration. And so for the first 10 minutes, we want you to introduce yourselves and share the work that you're doing. This will just provide important context for the breadth and depth of experience represented on this call, and maybe a meaningful way for everyone to connect. We also ask during these first 10 minutes, once people have introduced themselves, that two individuals volunteer, one to be the moderator, who will just continue to guide the group through the schedule that I'm about to share, and then the second to be the rapporteur, who will have the opportunity to share what your group discussed when we come back together. So then for the next 15 minutes, we encourage you to take the time to really discuss strategies, successes, lessons learned, to problem solve. This is really an opportunity to share a lot of ideas. And then for the final 10 minutes, we ask that you define a commitment using the framework that Laura just shared, with choosing at least one of the 4 principles for creating change that we can move forward with. And you'll share any key points that you'd like to from the discussion, and then also share your commitment when we return back together. So I'll give you just a minute to look and see. We have several different breakout groups that you can choose to join, all related to violence against women and girls. Group number 1 is female genital mutilation. Group number 2 will focus their conversation on the Convention on the Elimination of All Forms of Discrimination against Women. Group 3 will look at violence against women and girls and healthcare. This also includes mental health. Group 4 will look at violence against women and human trafficking and migration. Group 5 looking at violence against women and girls in conflict specifically. Group 6, always with the focus on violence against women and women's livelihood. Group 7 will look at early and forced child marriage. Group 8 will look at strategies for partnerships in diverse areas. We know that a holistic approach is really critical to both understanding root causes and consequences, and then addressing them. And then if you don't see the area that you're working on represented in one of these 8 groups, you are welcome to join an open group, group 9 and 10, where there will be a variety of people who are welcome to discuss the work that they're doing in ending violence against women and girls. So with that, as you should see shortly, an opportunity on your screen to come up for you to join one of those groups. And you'll see again the schedule of the 35 minutes listed above, as well as just a quick opportunity for you to review the 4 principles for change. And then we'll look forward to seeing you back in 35 minutes.
So if you didn't have a pop-up, you can go down to the bottom of your screen to the More button, click Breakout Rooms, and then choose the group that you'd like to join.
Okay, welcome back from your breakout rooms. I hope you had time to at least begin some meaningful discussion in your specific sub areas. Gloria now is going to lead us through having each of the groups share a report on some of the key points in their discussion and or commitments that they created together.
So welcome back everyone from the breakout session. It has been great experience sharing and awesome learning. It has been a broader engagement, and we have raised critical issues and exchanged transformative ideas that will help propel legal, social, and cultural processes to end violence against women and girls, for that matter, in all societies, countries, and regions of the world. Thank you, everyone. And shall we take our reports from our rapporteurs?
Thank you very much, Gloria. My name is Elizabeth, I am talking on behalf of the Female Genital Mutilation Breakout Session. Can I go ahead with our report?
Sage, please, you can continue.
Okay, thank you so much. So we had 5 participants in all. We had people spread across from Kenya, Nigeria, and from the US. And we shared our experiences. We had different backgrounds. We had a male participant also in our group. So basically what we tried to talk about the different types of FGM. We talked about how it is viewed in where it is, the culture is rampant in Nigeria, in Kenya, in Sierra Leone. We talked about what we are doing in Nigeria about the female genital mutilation. I represent Medical Women's Association of Nigeria, and we have done some outreach. So I shared my experiences with the participants in our group that we have tried to create awareness and to tell the, go into the communities where this is practiced, to try to discourage the practice by discussing with these people that do this. Mostly they are females and elderly women, or sometimes even male, and we try to give them another source of livelihood because they complain that it is their job, that's where they get money from. And so we try to provide another source of livelihood for them to discourage the FGM practice. And then we have also talked to the young people, the mothers, and then the parents. We talk in church-based organizations and other groups, and other religious groups to discourage the practice of FGM. We had a participant from Kenya who shared what they are doing in Kenya, creating awareness among the young people and the youths to discourage the practice of FGM. We also had a participant who shared her experience from the United States, working with one of the victims of FGM from Sierra Leone, who even wrote a book about her experience. And we mentioned that it has caused a lot of difficulties in relationship, and some victims face a lot of pain and torture and rejection and difficulties in life, and also some medical problems that arise from facing the FGM practice. So those were the things we discussed. We also said it was important that we keep in touch and continue to share ideas and create awareness to discourage the practice of FGM. That is our report. I don't know if other people want to add anything from our group. Thank you.
Thank you.
I think for
Thank you
me,
so
the
much.
main thing is it's coming out as a cultural, we have the cultural dimension. It's deeply rooted culture. So it's traditional, and they see it as circumcision. We may call it mutilation. So we need to educate, awareness, and all of that. But if you're taking something from a group, you have to replace it with something else. Thank you.
Maybe just
Yes.
to add on the maybe just to add on FGM, where I was part of the team. My name is Tony Lela from Kenya, and I'm an activist against FGM, and also an administrator from Global Youth Consortium to end FGM by 2030. So basically, the thing that we need to do is we need to invest in young people so that they can champion their voices with their energy to end FGM. Because, like, for example, in my country, Kenya, we we are facing a bit of a challenge because most schools have closed and young girls have been forced to go for FGM. And women also have a role to not to be part of this course, because the mothers are the ones are giving consent for their children to go for FGM deep in the villages. Sometimes they even call the perpetrators to do them at their homestead, and it is so sad that it happens to even children who are born while still at the maternity. So we really have to do a lot to ensure that we fight for this vice as early as possible so that we end it by 2030. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. Okay, could we have a report from group number 2, the Convention on the Elimination of All Forms of Discrimination Against Women?
Yeah, sure. So our group talked about a couple main things. I think first we discussed like an overview of what CSW is. We had a lot of members of our group who were a bit inexperienced with the treaty and were just kind of there to like learn how it can be implemented in their specific communities. And then we discussed how gender-based violence is a large part of CSW, and it's getting so more people to agree to that commitment would be great in like helping to stop this. And CSW does have like regulation, and so it like member states that sign on to that agree to the regulation, so that can also help to decrease violence against women. And there was also a point made about the need to encourage men and boys to be supportive of the treaty and be allies in this gender equality. And I think 2 commitments that we identified in this specific topic were first to advocate for more specific language around gender-based violence in the treaty, because right now there's a lot of like broad language that encompasses gender-based violence, but we said more specific language around that would be great. And then also finding ways to connect CSW to climate justice initiatives for people and like women and girls, especially in areas that are affected by climate change, because we know that rates of gender-based violence are higher in areas experiencing natural disaster. If anybody else in the group has anything to add, but I think that was it.
Great, thank you, Mackenzie. If no one else in the group has anything to add, we'll move on to a report from the groups talking about violence against women and girls specific to healthcare, including mental health.
Well, I took a lot of notes in this, and anyone that wants to jump in, please help me. There was 15 of us, and towards the end, I put together a word cloud of what seemed to be the messages that came out of our group. This is a little unfair because the conversation was rich and there was lots of involvement. But one of the a word cloud to me would be education of the community and in schools and in university, education from a very, very young age, educate from early childhood of both boys and girls. And a specific example was tabled from Sydney, Australia. The other one was involve the men. Right from the beginning, the discussion said, where are the men? Involve the men in the discussions about the health and prevention of abuse and violence against women and girls. There was a strong message to improve mental health services. Almost all participants from all parts of the world gave an indication that mental health services were lacking. There was a strong message about accountability of perpetrators, and both the accountability of perpetrators and perhaps going forward, the management and treatment of perpetrators. There was a strong message around social media accountability, and education, again, from a very young age in the issues around social media, but a message about the UN itself, sending a clear message to the companies behind the social media platforms about their accountability as well. That was my tiny summary. There were 15 of us, so please, anyone else that has something to say, please jump in at this stage.
Yeah, so just going off of what Marjorie was saying. So I'm from the OSMTH division for the junior delegate. And so I work more of like on the youth side of women and young girls like violence. So what I was also contributing, what we were all talking about based on the social media and kind of how the mental health like impact of how the isolation of speaking out and being able to post publicly in front of like you have older people viewing what young girls or young boys are posting, how it also mentally impacts you, how it has that it damages also your maturity level of having access to everything. So we were talking about how also at schools, at just starting through like elementary, middle school, high school, kind of taking it at the roots of speaking out and not only isolating girls, talking about what we can do as victims and survivors, and boys what we could do as, you know, being the ones that are doing these most of the time these actions to these young women, but how to group them together to kind of base this like community of branching off of each other, of how it both impacts not only themselves at this young age, but how it will generationally impact everyone else.
To also add to what was said, we talked about break away from the excuses that we continue to make for men and boys against violence against young women. We also talked about their program called Men or Boys to Walk the Talk. They also talked about the Bible part of it, the cultural part of the Bible. Sometimes we have to move away from the Bible and using the Bible to quote certain things, because the Bible can misinterpret, and also the Bible speaks about some of the things that is happening sexually against children and women. They also talk about to involve the men more in all spheres of the conversations against women, about their rights and reproductive system. They talk about the conversation with the religious groups to question the dogma within religion, scriptures to address religion and the grassroots to education, where we need to go right back to the grassroots of education. And we also, in regards to the social media, just to add to what they said finally, in the social media, we have some of the artists performing, and they had online social dance groups where they have the girls twerking in underwears and stuff. And like, for example, when you report it on Instagram, Instagram is telling you that it's not a violation, but you have these young girls twerking in, these young girls and the Instagram. So the United Nations need to send a strong message to all social media platforms to tell them that if it's that they do not protect the rights of our young girls and children, yes, they may be old enough to make sense, but at the end of the day, if this is happening, this is where you get all the predators. The men will look at these young girls and target them. So that is some of the things we add to the discussion.
Thank you so much for these important reports on, especially the focus on mental health and bringing to attention the online component of protecting and supporting mental health. I'm seeing a common pattern in the first three groups of us engaging everyone. I think every group so far has talked about the importance of engaging boys and men as well. Let's move forward to group number 4 on human trafficking and migration.
Okay, I'm Linda McDonald. And we had a large group. I think it was, I didn't count because there were people coming in at the end, but I think it was between 12 and 15. And the majority of the members in the group had not really heard about human trafficking very much, so they came to learn. So that message tells me that we have to do a lot more education about human trafficking and how prominent it is in society in all countries, because if people are still learning about human trafficking, that means that there's not enough of us really knowing what to look for. So education is really key. And what we talked about is how important it was to trust the women or girls who come forward to identify that they've been trafficked in some way and to let them go at their pace. And someone had asked about exiting services, and a woman from the UK was talking about the Seroptimist exiting program, which sounds excellent, where they have a safe house for the women. And sometimes they go back to the traffickers and then they accept them back again, and then they provide them with education. So of course, anyone who works in human trafficking knows how important the exiting is, and it's very rare to have good exiting services. So it was great to hear from the Seroptimists in the UK. And a woman from Nigeria was talking about how women are offered in times of turmoil a good job, and then of course that's a lie, and they're then recruited into or groomed and trapped into human trafficking, often labor trafficking or sexualized human trafficking. We recognize that torture does indeed happen in trafficking, and that parents can be the traffickers. It doesn't always have to be strangers or pimps that are outside of the family. And to know that the majority of traffickers are most often family, and that's a mispopulation that's not being recognized in society. So that group is really not being scrutinized enough to recognize the trafficking and torture inflicted in families. And that there's an element of racism in human trafficking, in that the majority of them are Black or brown women and girls, and that the racism has to be dealt with as well, and sexism, because the majority of sexualized trafficking is women and girls. There's more in the labor trafficking, there's more men involved, and there's boys involved in all forms of trafficking, but less in comparison to girls. That trafficking really harms the woman's sense of self, or women or girls or anyone who's trafficked, their sense of self. And they have to be recognized as being normal, even though their responses can be extreme, and that they're not mentally ill. And the services should be provided in a way that doesn't stigmatize them or offer judgment, and it offers care instead. We talked about how important it was for women and girls to tell their story in trafficking, and that's part of the healing, that they need a safe place to do that. And the main component of that is caring. If someone is caring to listen, then women and girls can indeed heal. And that it happens to all ages. And the woman from Eastern Europe asked about the trusting the police and whether that was prevalent. And from any of the work that I've done in the 28 years of listening to women and girls and anyone who's helping them, trusting the police is a big component because they're often still stigmatized or criminalized by the police. And so focusing on the demand or the buyers or the men is much more important way to shift the police and to stop focusing on targeting the girls as being the problem or being sexualized in some way when they're acting out and trying to escape. And if anyone else wants to add something to it, feel free to go forward.
If I can just quickly add, I think the key is education is absolutely spot on, because I think, at least from where I'm from, which is the US, it's very much either this mythology that is hugely dramatized of the industry of human trafficking, which isn't the reality and doesn't touch upon some of those key details of parents and family as traffickers or other aspects, or it's just brushed to the side and then never addressed. And so having these conversations and this education is absolutely key, and I appreciate it.
Thank you so much, both of you, for that report. And I also just want to direct everyone's attention to the chat if you haven't already been following, as other team members are adding comments and resources to add and support to what each of the reporters are sharing with us. Okay, let's move forward to the Violence Against Women and Girls and Conflict report.
I'm happy to jump in if anybody else doesn't want to. We had some really useful discussions just around the projects that we were working on to help peace and reconciliation, I suppose, in our communities. So we bonded a lot over, I suppose, the different art projects that are taking place, and me being from Northern Ireland, others being from, I think there was, oh, I saw a comment there in the chat. Others being from, I suppose, I think there was LA, and there was a couple of other places. There's only about 3 of us anyway. But we really focused on, I suppose, networking with each other and building connections. We've all exchanged contact details to be part of each other's projects. We thought that was really, really important. For me, coming from a post-conflict society in Northern Ireland, it's a bit of a different context, but it's still really important because we're still working towards continuing to build on that peace that we have worked so hard to get at this point. So it's really good to have those international contacts to be able to build and inspire each other of our projects from each other, but also to maybe engage in some form of partnership, and maybe in the future, if there's an opportunity to travel or to build on something overseas, even if it is virtual, it's just a really good chance to work together. So the pillar, I suppose, we focused most on was around that, supporting civil society movements and driving change, but by supporting each other rather than creating more and more spaces. There were some more specifics if anybody wants to jump in and talk about their projects in particular that you might want to let the rest of the group know about, but that was the general overview of the discussion.
Thank you so much, Nicole. For the sake of time, I think we're going to keep moving forward, but I just wanted to underscore what Nicole said about really the value and the power in making connections globally and locally. And I hope all of you have met people that you want to connect with and continue this conversation further with. And thank you also, Nicole, for bringing to our attention both post-conflict and current conflict. I think that's really important to acknowledge. Okay, women's livelihood. Can that group give a report? Okay, anyone would like to join from the Women's Livelihood Group in Violence Against Women? If not, we'll move on to someone sharing from the early and forced child marriage.
Yes, can you hear me? Yes. I just had an amazing experience meeting 10 wonderful women who are very concerned about this issue. We had some of the same thoughts about education. One of our thoughts was that fathers need to be educated about early childhood marriage, make men more aware of how this affects a young woman as she grows older, and to even start with educating young boys so that in their awareness, they will not have the same ideas that their elders had, and that they won't expect the same thing. We had a very personal story, a report from one of our members who was married at age 14 to a 31-year-old man. It wasn't a forced marriage. It wasn't wrong, but as she aged and grew through her womanhood, she realized that that was not really the best way for her to have had that decision made. Education was limited because of that, but she had a wonderful story of success that she went on, and at age 50 got her degrees in education, and it is a very well-educated, brilliant woman. We talked about in Pakistan, they're able to help women, girls escape from this, and they're using links to embassies to be able to locate those girls, because if they have to return to their family, then there's many problems. They suffer guilt, and they also could suffer abuse from the parents who are very upset that they ran away from that marriage. We agreed that successes come from education. Maryland has legislation in place, which is very wonderful to hear about. Let's see what else. We decided the best strategies are to educate, make awareness rise, and to try to change laws one state at a time. I was shocked to find out that 44 of the 50 states in the US have allowed child marriage still on their laws. We also, so we need to work in the United States besides the other countries that have the culture. It's not always just a matter of culture. It's often a result of some kind of a violence or a crisis. Either a child has, in the family, they've had problems economically and the parents don't know what to do with many children, and so they marry them off so that they don't have the financial responsibility for them. And yes, other crises could be pregnancy, war, natural disasters, and some parents thinking we just need to find them a husband to take care of them because we're no longer able. Very insightful. It was an amazing discussion and rose my awareness significantly. And I think we all benefited from realizing that it's not just culture. It's not just a tradition. It happens because of many other situations. And our best way is to try to campaign and educate the legislators and the families. Back to the family, as always.
I'd like to add on that, on child, early and forced marriage. My name is Millicent from Kenya, and I'm an activist on early child marriages. And what you're saying is true. Mostly in our country, the main reason why girls are married off at an early age is because of poverty, because the family is not able to even provide for itself. So this girl is given off for marriage at an early age to save the family from whatever is happening. And what we're saying, and the kind of solution that we want to see in our country, is that we want to see an end-to-end solution, a solution that an NGO or civil society organizations don't just come to rescue the girls from the marriage and take them back to their father's home and not give that family a solution. So we need to see empowerment starting from the girls' families and the girls themselves being empowered to fend for themselves, being educated, and a solution that is going to make these girls, once they are rescued from the early marriages, they're not just being taken back home and nothing is given. We just leave them there and to fend for themselves, and you just give them more burdens, because some of these girls return home with other kids to fend for. So if you just take them from the people who have married them and back to their parents' home, or you take them to some shelter and you dump them in that shelter and not provide for that shelter, there are no resources, they're just, you leave them in a distress. So what you're saying is we need to see solutions that are end to end. We don't need half solutions. And that is why we're still asking the question of, there are so many resources that we see being allocated to civil societies, so many things that the UN presents to us that they've been working on fighting FGM, they've been working on child marriages, and we are asking the question, where is this money? Where are these resources? Who are the people who are receiving these resources? Because at the end of the day, we do not see any impact in the ground. That's all.
Thank you so much for underscoring the complexity and the need to understand how multifaceted this violence in the form of early and forced marriages. Okay, we just have a few minutes left, so we're going to ask group number 8 on strategies for partnership across diverse groups, and then we'll also have, if anyone in the open group would like to briefly share before we wrap up.
Great, thanks. Hi, my name is Paula Mendes. I'll be sharing on behalf of the group. It was about between 7 and 9 of us. Some elements that were mentioned and actually were the base of our conversation. Everyone got a chance to introduce themselves, some of the work we do, and the interest of joining this space to learn about best practices on how to engage with partners, create partnerships to further the work that we are doing. And in this sense, we shared some of the challenges that some of us have identified, such as building awareness of who should be a partner in the conversation or in the work that we're doing. The issue of building trust between partnerships was also something that we talked about and we shared about. And then sometimes the lack of capacities from stakeholders to create and sustain this sense of trust. And also when talking about the construction of trust among partnerships, which was an element that many of us shared about. It was also mentioned the importance of readdressing how we understand the partnerships, readdressing maybe the jealousy or the competition that we might have among organizations and colleagues. And another element that was very present was this desire or this interest in working with varied stakeholders and building bridges, for example, between the religious groups and religious sectors with authorities. One of the members of the conversation works with the police force. So just in the sense of sharing best practices on how to build these relationships. And a tip, not a tip, but a piece of information as a best practice that was shared was also about recognizing the roles that we have and also acknowledging the contributions that we can have as partners. And we also did mention a little bit about the funders, how funders may contribute to this competition among collaborators or among organizations, and how, a different perspective or a different approach, just revisiting the approaches and the strategies that funders have can also contribute to the better management of building these partnerships and collaborations. So that would be some of the conversation that we had. If anyone else from the group might want to share, go ahead. I will also be sharing a link on the chat box, which can guide you all to the notes that we took from the conversation, just in case you're interested on contacting someone else.
Thank you so much, Paula. Is there anyone just very briefly from the open group number 9 or 10 who would like to add something that wasn't articulated in the other focus breakout groups?
I placed in the chat that our group also echoed many of the sentiments already spent, but we also, which was really wonderful, that people also, we asked that everyone please include digital violence, which is becoming quite prevalent now, and also underscoring listening to young people, and that bullying from several communities, LGBTQI, everyone, that it's not acceptable. It's just not acceptable. And so for and about, and just having that respect, knowing that we have to work together, I think was basically what we wanted, but it was a wonderful group. Everyone shared, and if there's anything, anyone please just add that. I wrote it in the chat, but please add.
Thank you so much. And unfortunately, our time is up. And so if people would like to continue adding to the chat, anything they didn't get the opportunity to share in our report back, please continue to do so. I think all of us could enjoy and spend much more time talking about these important topics and sharing ideas and support. But just in this last minute of this conversation, I just wanted to thank you all for prioritizing this time and taking the time to share your wisdom and your expertise. We also want to briefly acknowledge and thank the NGO committee on the status of women, for organizing these important conversations. They're tremendous leaders in this field and in advocating for gender equality. So thank you to them. Please, in the last couple minutes, feel free to directly message or exchange contact information with individuals you've met who you'd like to continue to connect with. Probably one of the most powerful outcomes of these conversations are really the opportunity to meet people and make connections and learn from each other. You're most welcome to follow up with any of the moderators, myself, Laura, and Gloria. Our email addresses and other ways you can contact us are on this slide for you to see. And just maybe a quick final statement, if you'll stay for 10 extra seconds. But we just wanted to express our gratitude and hope and confidence in each of you and the important work you're doing, both at the grassroots and all the way to the global level. As we've discussed today, it really takes a very holistic approach, and it takes all of us. So we applaud and just express gratitude for your persistent and courageous efforts in this important work of advocating for and ending violence against women and girls. So with that, thank you very much. And we send our best wishes as you continue to enjoy the Convention on the Status of Women.
Thank you.